She stood there, hands raised, humiliated in front of dozens of strangers, accused, handcuffed, and treated like a criminal over a bottle of water she had already paid for. The officers didn't ask questions. They didn't check receipts. They saw a young black woman and made their assumptions. But what they didn't know, what nobody in that store knew, was that the woman they were arresting was Captain Jasmine Reeves, a decorated 15-year veteran of the police force. And in less than 60 seconds, everything they thought they knew about power, authority, and race was about to be shattered. This is the story of a woman who dedicated her life to upholding the law, only to become its victim in the most public, degrading way imaginable.
Captain Jasmine Reeves was not someone who sought attention. At 38, she had built a reputation as one of the most respected officers in the Metro City Police Department. Firm but fair, disciplined yet compassionate. She'd risen through the ranks through sheer determination, navigating a career path where women like her weren't always welcomed, let alone celebrated. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm for late October. Jasmine had just finished a grueling shift, back-to-back meetings about community policing initiatives, a training seminar for new recruits, and paperwork that seemed endless. She was off duty now, dressed casually in a black crop top and white shorts, her natural hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She wanted nothing more than to grab a few groceries and head home to her apartment, where silence and a hot shower awaited. The grocery store was one of those newer, upscale chains that had recently opened in the city's downtown district. Bright fluorescent lights, wide aisles, overpriced organic produce, and a clientele that was noticeably different from the neighborhoods Jasmine patrolled daily. She noticed it immediately when she walked in. The looks. The way eyes followed her as she moved through the produce section. The way the security guard near the entrance seemed to track her path with just a bit too much interest. But Jasmine was used to it. She lived with these glances her entire life, the subtle suspicion, the unspoken assumptions. She'd learned long ago not to let it bother her. She had a badge, a title, and a career that spoke for itself. What did she have to prove to strangers in a grocery store? She picked up a basket and moved through the aisles efficiently. Greek yogurt, a rotisserie chicken, some fresh fruit, a bottle of sparkling water. She was in and out of the beverage aisle in less than 2 minutes, placing the water bottle in her basket alongside everything else. At the self-checkout, she scanned each item carefully, paid with her credit card, and placed everything into 2 reusable bags she'd brought from home. Everything was routine, normal, uneventful. Or so she thought. As Jasmine headed toward the exit, she took a long sip from the sparkling water she'd just purchased, the cool fizz refreshing after the heat outside. She was already thinking about what she'd cook for dinner, whether she had the energy to meal prep for the rest of the week. "Excuse me, excuse me!" The voice was sharp, piercing through the ambient noise of the store. Jasmine turned around, confused. A white woman in her mid-30s, wearing a green employee shirt with a name tag that read Karen, shift manager, was speed-walking towards her, flanked by the same security guard Jasmine had noticed earlier. Her face was flushed, her expression a mixture of righteous anger and something Jasmine recognized all too well. Certainty without evidence. "You need to come with me right now," Karen demanded, stopping just a few feet away, hands on her hips. Jasmine blinked. "What?" "Don't play dumb. I saw you. You took that water bottle without paying for it." Karen pointed accusingly at the bottle in her hand. For a moment, Jasmine was too stunned to respond. Around them, other shoppers had begun to slow down, turning to watch. The security guard stepped forward, a heavy-set white man in his 50s with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. "Ma'am, you're going to need to come back inside with us," he said, his tone flat and mechanical. Jasmine felt the familiar heat rising in her chest. Not panic, but something colder. Recognition. She knew exactly what was happening here. She'd seen it play out hundreds of times in her career, just never from this side of it. "I paid for everything in my bags, including that water bottle," Jasmine said calmly, keeping her voice even despite the eyes now fixed on her. "I have the receipt right here." "Then you won't mind showing it to us inside, will you?" Karen's voice dripped with false politeness that barely masked contempt. Something told Jasmine this wasn't going to end well, but she had nothing to hide. She reached into her bag for the receipt, ready to prove what she already knew to be true. She had no idea she was about to become a viral news story.
"I already told you, I paid for everything. Here's the receipt." Jasmine pulled out the thin slip of paper and held it out toward Karen, her hand steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers. Karen barely glanced at it. "That could be from anything. That could be from yesterday. How do I know you didn't just grab that bottle and walk out?" "Because I scanned it, right there." Jasmine pointed toward the self-checkout lane she'd used just minutes ago. "You have cameras. Check them." "We will," Karen snapped. "But right now, you're coming with us, or I'm calling the police." The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine. "I am the police," she thought, but she didn't say it. Not yet. She knew how this worked. The moment a black person started asserting authority, claiming credentials, insisting on respect, it only made things worse. She'd seen suspects try it 1,000 times. It never helped. "Fine," Jasmine said quietly. "Let's go inside and sort this out." But as she moved to follow Karen back toward the customer service desk, something shifted. More employees had gathered now. Another manager, 2 cashiers, the security guard hovering just behind her, like she might bolt at any second. And the whispers had started. "I knew it. She seems suspicious. Always the ones you least expect." Jasmine's jaw tightened. She'd spent 15 years protecting people who looked at her like this. She'd put her life on the line for communities that still saw her as a threat. And now, here she was, in a grocery store, being paraded through the aisles like a common thief over a bottle of sparkling water. At the customer service desk, Karen made a show of examining the receipt, holding it up to the light, comparing timestamps, looking for any discrepancy she could find. Jasmine stood there, silent, her arms crossed, watching the performance. "This receipt is dated today, but it doesn't prove you paid for that specific water bottle," Karen finally declared, as if she'd uncovered some great conspiracy. "Then check the security footage," Jasmine repeated, her patience thinning. "We're not going to waste our time reviewing footage for every shoplifter who walks in here with a story. I'm not a shoplifter." That's what they all say. The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Around them, shoppers had stopped pretending they weren't watching. Some had their phones out now, recording every second. 2 white women in yoga pants whispered to each other, shaking their heads in that performative way people do when they want to be seen as sympathetic without actually intervening. And then Karen made the call. "Yes, hi, I need officers at the Riverside Grocery on 5th Street. We have a shoplifter refusing to cooperate. Black female, late 30s, wearing a black top and white shorts. She's getting aggressive." "I haven't raised my voice once," Jasmine said. But Karen had already turned away, phone pressed to her ear, reciting details like she was describing a dangerous suspect instead of a woman holding a receipt and a shopping bag. Jasmine felt the old, familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the exhaustion that came from being seen as guilty before she ever had a chance to prove her innocence. She thought about walking out. She had done nothing wrong. She had her receipt. She could just leave. But she knew what would happen if she did. They'd spin it. Suspect fled the scene, refused to cooperate, became aggressive. It would be her word against theirs. And, in a world where a black woman's word was worth less than a white manager's assumption, Jasmine knew how that story ended. So she stayed. She stood there in the middle of that bright, sterile grocery store, surrounded by strangers who had already decided what she was, and she waited. 7 minutes later, 2 patrol officers walked through the door. Jasmine recognized them immediately.
Not personally, but by type. Young, white, confident in their authority. The kind of officers who'd been on the force just long enough to think they'd seen it all, but not long enough to question their own biases. "That's her," Karen said, pointing at her like she was identifying a suspect in a lineup. The taller officer, whose name tag read Mitchell, approached Jasmine with his hand resting casually on his belt near his weapon. His partner, Stevens, hung back, surveying the scene. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to put your bags down and step over here." "I paid for everything," Jasmine said, keeping her voice calm, professional. "Then you won't mind if we take a look." It wasn't a question. Jasmine set her bags down on the counter. Mitchell rifled through them, pulling out each item, examining them like evidence at a crime scene. He held up the bottle of sparkling water she'd been drinking from. "You opened this already." "Yes, after I paid for it." "That's not what the manager says." "Then the manager is wrong." Mitchell's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down." "I am calm," and she was. Eerily calm, the kind of calm that came from years of training, from knowing that any display of emotion would be used against her. But it didn't matter. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The store went silent. Jasmine stared at him. "You're arresting me?" "We're detaining you pending further investigation. Turn around." "For a bottle of water I paid for?" "Turn around, ma'am, or this is going to get a lot harder for you." The threat was implicit, but clear. Jasmine had seen this moment play out from the other side 100 times. She knew what came next if she resisted, even verbally. She knew how quickly detained for questioning could turn into resisted arrest. She knew how a simple misunderstanding could escalate into violence, into headlines, into another hashtag. So she did what she'd trained countless civilians to do when dealing with law enforcement. She complied. She turned around, she placed her hands behind her back, and she felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around her wrists. The crowd gasped. Phones rose higher, recording every second. "This is insane," someone muttered. "All this over water?" another voice whispered. But no one stepped forward. No one intervened. Mitchell gripped Jasmine's arm, not gently, and began walking her toward the exit. She kept her head high, her expression neutral, even as humiliation burned through her veins like acid. "She made a mistake," she said quietly. "That's for the judge to decide." They were halfway to the door when Jasmine's phone started ringing in her pocket, loud, insistent. The ringtone was distinctive, the department's internal line. Mitchell stopped. "Who's calling you?" "My phone is in my pocket. I can't exactly answer it." He pulled the phone out roughly, glanced at the screen. His expression shifted, just slightly. "Who's Lieutenant Davis?" he asked. "My commanding officer." "You should probably answer it." Mitchell hesitated, then pressed the green button and put the phone on speaker. "Reeves, where the hell are you? We've got a situation developing, and I need you back at—" "This isn't Captain Reeves," Mitchell interrupted. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" Lieutenant Davis' voice had gone cold, sharp. "Officer Mitchell, Metro PD. I'm currently detaining—" "Did you just say detaining?" "Yes, sir. We responded to a call about a—" "What is your badge number?"
Mitchell's face drained of color. Badge 2847, sir, but— You listen to me very carefully, Officer Mitchell. Lieutenant Davis's voice cracked through the speaker like a whip. The woman you have in handcuffs is Captain Jasmine Reeves, supervisor of the 5th District and one of the highest-ranking officers in this department. And unless you want to be directing traffic at school crossings for the rest of your career, you will remove those cuffs right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in that grocery store was locked on Mitchell. His partner, Stevens, had gone pale, backing away slowly as if distance might somehow save him from the nuclear fallout that was clearly coming. Karen, the shift manager, looked like she was about to be sick. Mitchell's hands trembled as he fumbled with his keys, unlocking the handcuffs.
They fell away from Jasmine's wrists with a metallic clink that echoed through the store like a death knell. Jasmine didn't move. She stood there, rubbing her wrists where the metal had bit into her skin, staring straight ahead. She could feel every camera pointed at her, every shocked face, every person who had watched her be humiliated and done nothing. "Captain Reeves?" Mitchell's voice had gone small, childlike. I didn't know." Jasmine finally turned to look at him. Her expression was unreadable. Not angry, not relieved, just tired. So impossibly tired. "You didn't," she repeated softly. "No, you didn't. And you didn't bother to find out, did you?" The manager assumed. And you believed her. Because that's easier, isn't it? Easier to see what you expect to see than to actually investigate. Mitchell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Jasmine picked up her bags. Her groceries spilled across the customer service counter. She began methodically putting them back in, item by item, while the entire store watched in mortified silence. "Captain Reeves, I apologize. I truly—" Mitchell was scrambling now, trying to salvage something unsalvageable. "Do you know how many times I've responded to calls exactly like this one? How many times I've had to tell someone who looked like me, to comply, to stay calm, to not make this worse for themselves? I've built my career on being the bridge, on proving that law enforcement can be fair, can be just, can see past color and bias." She zipped her bag closed and slung it over her shoulder. "And today, I learned what every black parent tries to teach their children from the moment they're old enough to understand. It doesn't matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished. It doesn't matter that you've dedicated 15 years of your life to serving your community. When someone looks at you and sees only your skin color, none of that matters." Karen had tears streaming down her face now, but she didn't spare her a glance. "I paid for my groceries," Jasmine said, her voice cutting through the thick, suffocating silence. "I had the receipt. I offered to show you the security footage. And instead of doing the most basic level of investigation, you called the police on me, accused me of being aggressive when I never raised my voice, and humiliated me in front of dozens of people." She finally turned to Karen, and the shift manager actually flinched. "I want you to think about something. If I had been a white woman in yoga pants, would you have followed me through the store? Would you have accused me of stealing over a bottle of water I was openly drinking? Would you have called the police?" Karen's mouth opened and closed silently, tears still running down her cheeks, but she had no answer. They both knew the truth. Jasmine looked around the store one last time, at the phone still recording, at the stunned faces, at Mitchell and Stevens who looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. "I've spent my entire career trying to change the system from the inside, trying to prove that we can do better, that we are better. But standing here, in handcuffs, in front of all of you, over a bottle of water I paid for?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Lieutenant Davis's voice crackled through the phone again, still on speaker in Mitchell's trembling hand. "Captain Reeves, I'm on my way to you now. Don't leave. We need to document this, file a formal—" "I'm going home, Marcus," Jasmine said, her exhaustion finally seeping through. "I'm taking the rest of the week off. We'll talk later." She started walking toward the exit, her head held high despite everything. The crowd parted before her like a sea, everyone suddenly desperate not to be seen, not to be associated with what had just happened. As she pushed through the glass doors into the fading daylight, she heard Mitchell's voice behind her, desperate. "Captain, please, I'm sorry, I didn't—" Jasmine didn't turn around. "You did," she said quietly. "That's the problem. You did. Exactly what you were trained to do. You saw a black woman and made assumptions. The only difference is, this time, there were consequences."
The video went viral within 3 hours. By the next morning, Cop arrests police captain was trending on every social media platform. The footage, captured by at least 6 different phones, showed everything. Karen's accusations, Mitchell's immediate escalation, the handcuffs, the moment Lieutenant Davis's voice cracked through the speaker, and Jasmine's quiet, devastating words to the crowd as she walked out. The grocery store issued a public apology before noon. Karen was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Mitchell and Stevens were reassigned to desk duty. The police commissioner held a press conference calling the incident unacceptable and promising a full review of department protocols. But Jasmine wasn't interested in any of it. She sat in her apartment for 3 days, phone turned off, ignoring the emails and calls and interview requests that poured in. She replayed the incident over and over in her mind, not because she didn't understand what had happened, but because she couldn't stop seeing the faces of everyone in that store, the people who had watched, the people who had recorded, the people who had done nothing. On the 4th day, her younger sister Maya came over uninvited, let herself in with a spare key, and found Jasmine sitting on her couch in the same clothes she'd been wearing for 2 days straight. "Jazz," Maya said softly, sitting down beside her. "You okay?" Jasmine laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "I handcuffed people, Maya. For 15 years, I put handcuffs on people and told them it was necessary, that it was protocol, that if they just complied, if they just stayed calm, everything would be fine. You were doing your job." "Was I?" Jasmine looked at her sister, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Or was I complicit in the same system that just did this to me?" Maya didn't have an answer. Over the following weeks, the incident sparked a national conversation about racial profiling, implicit bias, and the experiences of black officers within law enforcement. News outlets ran segments, think pieces flooded the internet, town halls were held, and through it all, Jasmine remained quiet. Until she received a letter. It came from a teenage girl named Desiree, a high school student from across the city. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "Dear Captain Reeves, I saw what happened to you. My mom made me watch the video because she wanted me to understand that even when we do everything right, even when we become successful, even when we serve our communities, we're still seen as suspicious first. I've been stopped twice walking home from school this year. Both times I was just walking. Both times I had to prove I wasn't doing anything wrong. I used to want to be a lawyer so I could change things, but after watching what happened to you, I don't know if things can change. If someone like you, a police captain, can't get justice in a grocery store, what chance do the rest of us have? I don't know why I'm writing this. I guess I just wanted you to know that I saw you, and I'm sorry that even being who you are wasn't enough. Sincerely, Desiree." Jasmine read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called Lieutenant Davis. "I'm coming back, but things are going to be different." 2 months later, Captain Jasmine Reeves stood before a room of police academy recruits, young officers just starting their careers, their uniforms still crisp, their certainty still intact. "I'm going to tell you a story," she began, "about the day I was arrested for shoplifting. Not by criminals, not by corrupt cops, but by officers who looked exactly like you, who were trained exactly like you, who believed they were doing the right thing." She told them everything, every humiliating detail, every assumption, every moment where protocol overrode humanity. "Here's what I want you to understand," she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "Every person you encounter is someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's hope for the future. They are not their skin color, they are not your assumptions. They are human beings worthy of dignity, investigation, and the benefit of the doubt." She paused, looking at their young faces. "I became a cop because I believed in justice, real justice, not the kind that treats people differently based on how they look, or how much money they have, or what neighborhood they live in.
And I'm staying a cop because I still believe that change is possible. Not easy, but possible. Some of you are probably thinking this will never happen to you, that you don't see color, that you're not biased. But bias isn't about being a bad person. It's about unconscious associations we've all been taught. And if we don't actively work against it, if we don't question our first instincts, if we don't investigate before we judge, then we become part of the problem. We become the reason people like Desiree think change is impossible. One recruit raised her hand tentatively. "Captain, did you ever think about quitting after what happened?" Jasmine smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Every single day. But then I remember that little girl's letter, and I remember all the people who are counting on us to do better, to be better. And I stay. Because if I leave, who's going to train the next generation to see people, not stereotypes?" The room was silent. "So here's my challenge to you," Jasmine continued. "The next time you respond to a call, the next time you make an assumption about someone based on how they look, pause. Ask questions. Investigate. See the person, not the profile, because one day you might be the officer who has to decide whether to believe a store manager's assumptions or a woman with a receipt. And the choice you make in that moment will define not just your career, but the life of the person standing in front of you." She looked around the room one last time. Justice isn't about being colorblind. It's about seeing color, acknowledging the different experiences that come with it, and choosing fairness anyway. That's the job. That's the oath. And that's what I'm asking you to commit to today. The grocery store incident became a catalyst for reform in Metro PD. New training programs were implemented, body cameras became mandatory, protocols for investigating accusations were revised to require actual evidence before detentions. But Jasmine knew the real change wouldn't come from policies and procedures. It would come from moments. Individual officers making conscious choices to see people as human beings rather than threats. Some days she still thought about that bottle of sparkling water, about the handcuffs, about standing in that bright, sterile store while strangers recorded her humiliation. But mostly she thought about Desiree, and about every young person who needed to believe that justice was possible. And she kept showing up, kept speaking up, kept fighting. Because that's what hope looks like when it refuses to die. This isn't just Jasmine's story. It's the story of countless people who've been judged, suspected, and humiliated simply because of how they look. It's a reminder that bias doesn't disappear with badges or titles or accomplishments. It requires conscious, continuous effort to overcome. So I ask you, what will you do the next time you witness injustice? Will you record it? Will you speak up? Will you intervene? Because change doesn't happen in courtrooms or policy meetings. It happens in grocery stores, on street corners, in everyday moments where ordinary people choose courage over comfort. Jasmine chose to stay and fight. What will you choose? If this story moved you, share it. If it challenged you, sit with that discomfort. And if it inspired you, let that inspiration turn into action.